So up next is Marina Miller. She's a SFU environment student, RASC Vancouver Center member, and a member of the, GA, the Inclusivity and Diversity, and the Youth Committees for the RASC, so she's very busy. So here's her presentation on making your center more environmentally friendly.
Awesome, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
And my screen's sharing?
Yep.
Okay, just wanted to double check. Awesome. All right, hello everyone. Once again, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that I live, work, and study on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. I'm really grateful to be speaking to you guys today from Vancouver. And as mentioned, I'm on the GA committee, so it's been a long time coming to get here today and last weekend as well. So I'm really happy that it's worked out. So a little bit about me. I'm a student of environment and geography at Simon Fraser University in Burnaby. And I've been fortunate to do co-op work with TransLink, our local transit authority, and the Vancouver Airport's Environment Department. During the General Assembly last year in Toronto, which my sister and I were very lucky to get to attend, some of us Vancouver members became inspired to make the 2020 GA green or environmentally friendly. As we planned the in-person event over the last year, we tried to incorporate green catering, sustainable merchandise, and environmental education, hence this lecture. But due to COVID-19, we had to unfortunately put a lot of these initiatives on the back burner, but still wanted to make it clear that the Vancouver GA values the environment. So today I'll present a few tips on how to make your center more environmentally friendly and some vocabulary as well. So we hear terms all the time like eco, green, natural, sustainable. But what does this really mean when we're buying products and services? Sometimes these buzzwords are used to create the illusion of environmental protection. So to be very broad, being environmentally friendly means reducing your greenhouse gas output, your energy and water consumption, your waste, and our impact on the ecosystem. For example, I live near the mouth of the Fraser River, which is also home to the Pacific salmon. Local government, the airport, First Nations, and other organizations here work really hard to protect this keystone species because they help balance the food chain. So how can you contribute at a center level? Once we get to meet in person again, carpooling is a really simple and collaborative way to get your members to meetings and events. You could even create an online forum or an email chain for members to coordinate carpooling or transit when it's accessible, because that would be ideal as well. But it's also good, even if you don't set up a program for this, to just encourage carpooling to your members. It can create some nice friendships along the way. I know I've had some great carpool with members of my center. So whether it's for a meeting or an event or something as big as the GA, it's super awesome to encourage reusable cups and bottles. This prevents the disposal of plastic water bottles, pop cans, and juice Tetra Paks. Members can bring their own drinks in those vessels, or they can even pour provided drinks into the empty ones. Though during COVID-19, we've all been very conscious of sharing, which I'll touch on later, but just in general, considering the normal, I would say sharing and pouring into a reusable cup is really ideal. Also, I would always want to add that there's probably local businesses around you where you can buy a really awesome tumbler that has art on it or whatever, or a water bottle. So definitely buy local when you can, because buying local actually reduces greenhouse gases because you're reducing the international distribution from big businesses far away, and it also stimulates your local economy. So when I was working at YVR, I worked in their environment department, and it's one of the biggest airports in the country. So they've got a lot to take care of over there. And even within the airport's corporate group, we were noticing that a lot of their corporate meetings were using disposable cutlery, disposable plates, things like that. And we were tasked with putting together some catering guidelines. I'll summarize some of the main things that you could even apply at your meetings and events. So using compostable fiber cutlery or metal cutlery instead of plastic, having the bring your own cup or bottle policy, using large jugs rather than individual water bottles, and keeping condiments in a shared bottle rather than having like tiny little individual cups with plastic that those can't be recycled very easily. So, and one of the key ones which became very prevalent at the airport because it's a huge place is having well labeled and easy to find garbage cans. And it's not something we always think about because we just, you know, you see the closest garbage can, you throw whatever you have in there. But it's really good to be conscious of what streams they have and don't try to be hopeful that you're putting it in the right one. Try and make your event accessible to everyone and easy to sort the items that you're going to be providing if there's any disposable items. Yeah, this can differ by venue as well. Usually a venue owner can provide waste bins in an easy to access place. And I wrote this a while ago, and after writing it, I began to reflect on how the current pandemic is affecting packaging and therefore waste. Even this morning, I went to breakfast with my sister, and usually when they would give you a bottle of ketchup, they brought to the table a small little cup of ketchup, a small cup of syrup, and tiny packs of salt and pepper, and that they will all be thrown in the garbage afterwards. So it's already affecting how we're packaging things. Things are being extra wrapped, individually wrapped, and people are more cautious of using shared items, which is totally understandable and will definitely have implications for how much Canada is throwing away in the next year. And I mean, I'm not exempt from this. I've found myself even being more wasteful than usual because it seems that so many plastic bags, the masks that we're using, and the gloves are being thrown out every day. And that being zero waste feels a little more unattainable. So I wonder like how long this is going to persist and how we can all stay motivated to reduce our waste, even during a global crisis. So this is something to consider for sure and to keep in mind. Also, I wanted to add that there's lots of great blogs like Going Zero Waste or Zero Waste Home, even if you just like Google zero waste blogs that have a lot of tips on how to reduce your waste. Like while I was working and doing waste management at the airport last year, I became really inspired to reduce my personal waste and try to encourage low waste at events like this GA. It was going to be as low waste as possible. And I even provided these green catering guidelines to the hotel that we were supposed to be at, and they were very happy to follow that. So, you know, it's really worth asking, even if you're not sure if it's going to work out. All right, so I wanted to touch on like a specific part of green catering, which is something I only just learned about last year, and that's compostable plastics. Yeah, so when purchasing non-reusable products, we want to beware of some eco-friendly buzzwords, like I mentioned earlier. Like terms like green, natural, certified green are used on products and service labels, but in reality, they're not always compostable in industrial facilities, for example. Ideally, you should generally avoid disposable cutlery and cups when you can, and use metal cutlery or scullery if possible, or even things like bamboo. That's a really great thing. They might cost a little bit more, and that's the main trade-off. So this really cool graphic talks about common green language, words that we're all pretty familiar with when you walk down the aisle at the grocery store. As well on the left are some of the standardization boards when it comes to like identifying legitimately compostable products. This may vary where you live, obviously, but you can look it up to make sure when you're buying a product for your event that it's compostable. And I wanted to put in a little bit of science, because what would RASC be without a little bit of science? Compostable plastics are made of polylactic acid, or PLA. It's a synthetic material made using bacteria to ferment agricultural waste. And then the acid is pressurized and combined with other chemicals to create a product, like a cup. So these days you can find what looks like a plastic cup, but it may have like a green leaf on it, and you realize oh, I can put this in the compost, and that's pretty cool. PLA can also be further heated to create crystallized PLA, which makes other products as well. So ideally, like if it's made correctly, they're completely compostable, but it may not be suitable for the industrial facility that it's going to after you throw it away in your city. It all really comes down to where it ends up, and it's hard for us to control that. So ideally, you want to prevent throwing things out in the first place. A lot of the red language on the right is used to advertise similar products that might be trying to pose as compostable plastic, but it might be misleading and not actually doing that. They sometimes actually contain plastic, and when they break down, they can contaminate the organic stream with everything else. It can even damage the equipment in the facility it goes to and create microplastics, which are harmful to the ecosystem. This is like a more big picture view, and I find this a very helpful graphic for me even. We're all familiar with reduce, reuse, recycle, right? The 3 R's. I've been learning that since elementary school. But I want to pose one more R, or at the top, avoid, which is refuse. So the truest way to reduce your waste is to refuse using a disposable product in the first place. And this obviously always isn't possible, but it's a good goal when you plan any event at your center. So this is my favorite part. I'm an environment student. I'm going into my 5th year, and I've gotten to take classes in so many amazing topics when it comes to sustainability, resource management, geography. I even have a certificate in computer mapping because it's so fascinating how our Earth works and how the systems are connected. I mentioned earlier, I think, that an indirect way to be environmentally friendly at your center is to provide environmental education. Inviting professors from a local university or reaching out to environmental professionals in your area would be a great addition to your meetings and events. So you could even contact, like I said, like at the airport, your local airport probably has environmental specialists, and they'd probably be happy to talk over Zoom about what they do. Yeah. I personally believe that astronomy and the curiosity for the universe is tightly linked with the environmental protection. For example, like the picture you see here, this 1968 Earthrise photo is actually cited as a major driver for the early environmental movement. Some lecture ideas, which I've listed here, that you could include in your center include light pollution and urban development, climate and atmospheric phenomena, ancient astronomy, and how astronomy relates to environmental ethics and stewardship. And to expand on that, like even simple things like the difference between climate and weather, it's a super useful thing to know for observers, and not everyone knows the difference. Plus, integrating environmental topics into RASC outreach is important for engaging and educating youth. I'm a member of the youth committee, and it's been really great to meet youth members from all across the country. And I think it would be a great way to encourage more youth members to join, to have environmental topics included. Today's youth essentially are the future policymakers and change makers in the world in the face of climate change. It's always important as well to educate and learn through an intersectional lens. So considering the intersections of class, race, sexuality, gender, and all these, place of origin, considering the intersections of how these affect each other is something that we should consider all the time when we're doing education, especially when it comes to the environment, because it's linked to all of those things. So like including Indigenous star stories and things like that is a fascinating topic that I love hearing about. And I know a lot of centers do a lot of Indigenous topics as well. The Vancouver Center website even has a page on it as well. But I think there's always room to include more. And Indigenous stories often inform their way of life, so we could definitely learn from them too. Lastly, I believe we must keep our environmental activism intersectional by acknowledging and integrating these Indigenous histories into how we protect the earth for the next generations. And this picture is from the I'm not sure how to pronounce it, one of the cultural centers from Washington, I believe. And it's depicting a story called, I think it was Raising the Sky Up or something like that. And it was a really great origin story of how the sky was pushed to the very top and that people were able to live in the kind of world that we live in now. So it's a really beautiful story. I recommend you look it up. So that's pretty much all from me. I hope I didn't rip through it too quickly, but I'd be happy to take some questions in the Q&A, or if there's time, yes. I'd be happy to take some questions in the Q&A or the chat. Let me see if I can see them.
Great. Thanks, Marina. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, you can either type them into the chat or use the Q&A section. So, let's see, any questions? Okay, here's one from Ben.
Oh yeah, if you want to read it, Gordon, you can, for sure.
So RASC mails out the Observer's Handbook and 6 issues of Sky News every year. Any thought on whether it would be better to give members an option to receive PDF instead?
Well, I think this was something that was brought up last year at the annual general meeting, which was my first time going to one. I'm relatively new to the long history of Sky News and all these publications, but from my opinion and from the youth committee's like sort of general opinion, we're all living in a digital kind of mind frame and we're happy to read things online most of the time. So I personally would be happy if the magazine was on a PDF for sure. I know a lot of people like to have a physical copy though, and it is great to see those star images on the beautiful glossy page, and I totally get that. But I think within our organization, there's always ways to improve on our paper waste and all of those sorts of things. And I'd be happy to help with that in the future as well. But because I'm pretty new, I don't just want to come in and be like, you have to change everything, you know? So, but definitely that's a great question. And Eric points out there's a digital download edition for Sky News subscribers. That's good, I didn't know that. I also put my email there as well. Do feel free to email me and ask me any questions. I even thought I would like offer up advice for anyone across the country who's like planning an event and you have any questions about things like that. I'd be happy to even provide you with resources, or like a lot of the information I got about compostable plastics came from a great study done in BC about how a lot of the times this stuff's going to our local facilities and not actually being processed properly. So I'd be happy to send that as well. Let's see if there's any others. I think that was all the questions. Yeah, but if you come up with a question later, like do email me, or I'm all over social media as well, so you can find me there. Yeah, I hope that was interesting. It was a bit of a different topic than we usually hear on RASC stuff. And I actually wrote this a year ago when I was inspired to do this, and I've been working on it over the last couple of weeks to update it. So I'm really glad that I got to give it, even though we're not in person. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so we're running a little ahead of schedule. I don't know. So we can either take a 5-minute break, or if, I don't know if Ian would want to take any questions at this time, since we've got a few minutes. I'm not sure if Ian's available at the moment. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break. And so we'll reconvene at 2 for Matt Simone's presentation. All right, thanks everyone. Yeah, so we'll be back in a few minutes.